Hello.
What a pleasure having you.
We'll get my earphones on. That's better.
I was saying, what a pleasure having you. What a pleasure having you finally at the Worldhappiness Fest.
Yeah, it's only been how many years?
We made it.
Yes, yes.
And this is a perfect time, right? We need compassion more than ever before. So
indeed.
So thank you so much for joining. We are going to be talking and focusing on compassion with Professor and Dr. James Doty, founder of the Seeker Center at Stanford University. So this is a real pleasure. And if there's somebody in the world who knows about compassion, that's you. So let's bring this amazing tool in many ways and techniques around compassion to as many people as possible. That will be the goal today. So it's not a small challenge, right, James?
No, absolutely not. But the reality is, if we can get one person to understand that within their power is the ability to change one person's life in a positive way, that's enough. And hopefully every one of those people will represent a drop in the ocean that will create a tsunami that covers the earth in compassion and ultimately lead to purpose, meaning, and happiness.
So we leave the floor with you. Let's learn from you, and thank you so much for joining the Worldhappiness Fest.
Yes,
so much.
Sure. So am I on, and are we going?
Yes, wow. You are on, and we are going. Let's go.
Well, hello, everyone, and it's a joy to be with you today. I'm at Stanford in California, and obviously, prior to the pandemic, people were suffering. They were suffering with stress, anxiety, often depression, and now with the pandemic, certainly we can add loneliness to that, which of course then exacerbates every one of those other problems. What is the antidote? And as Louis mentioned, one of those is compassion. And why is that? First of all, there is a challenge for many people to be compassionate. And what is compassion? It's a recognition of another's suffering with a motivational desire to alleviate that suffering. And thereby, it's an action. The problem for many people in their ability to exercise compassion to others is because they're very hypercritical towards themselves. And this is where the concept of self-compassion comes in. Because unless you can be kind and accepting and love yourself, it's truly very difficult to look out in the world and be compassionate with others. One of the challenges in the present situation is that so many people want to have life as it was. And the problem with that is then that you can never be present to deal with what's going on at this moment. And therefore, you can't really help yourself. You know, one of the challenges of being present is the reality that most of us either live in the past of what should have been, could have been, might have been, or a future unknown, hoping it's one way or another. And attachment to those two places fundamentally causes suffering. If you're not present, if you're not living in the present moment and having gratitude for that, that causes suffering. What exactly do I mean? Well, as I mentioned, many people want to have things the way they used to be. And the more you are attached to that concept, the more challenging it is to actually deal with today. And so one of the things that I think is extraordinarily important is this concept of acceptance. Acceptance of the present reality without being attached to the past. The other important thing is this concept of compassion for self. When we have challenges, oftentimes people reflect back on themselves that they're the problem. And when you tell yourself, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, it's not possible, that becomes your reality. And one of the first things that I learned when I was growing up and had the experience of interacting with a woman who really fundamentally changed my life was, first of all, to practice a mindfulness exercise of simply sitting, slowly breathing in through your nose and exhaling, and then with intention relaxing the muscles from your toes all the way to the top of your head, followed by simply listening to the dialogue that's going on in one's head. And I realized that that dialogue was a very negative dialogue and often resulted in me grabbing those negative comments and then repeating them to myself. And what this woman taught me was that you can actually change that dialogue to one of self-affirmation, positivity, and acceptance. And the very nature of doing so actually dramatically changes your physiology. It's interesting because many people look at compassion as weak and results in people walking all over you. And I will assure you that it's actually quite the opposite. And that compassion, though, has to start with yourself. So when you're able to change the dialogue and believe that you are worthy, that you have infinite possibilities, what it does is it gives you back your agency to help yourself as well as help others. The Dalai Lama has said acting compassionately is one of the only times it's okay to be selfish. And interestingly, neuroscience has proven that. And what I mean by that is when you are able to act compassionately, a huge shift goes on, not only in your brain, but peripherally. When you act compassionately, this results in those parts of your brain associated with reward and pleasure to be stimulated. You are being rewarded for caring. And then it has an effect on your physiology because it actually improves cardiac function. It lowers your blood pressure. It has a profound effect on your immunity. It actually results in the decreased expression of inflammatory hormones, which are associated with many disease states, especially chronic ones. And it lowers those stress hormones such as cortisol. And the presence of cortisol or stress hormones for a significant period of time has a huge, huge negative health effect. And in fact, when you practice compassion, it has more significance in terms of your mental and physical health than exercise and being at your ideal body weight. So I was talking about being compassionate. And some of you may know that two scientists have been spearheading this effort, as well as now many others. That's Kristen Neff and Chris Germer. And they've done an immense amount of study demonstrating how beneficial it is for one to be compassionate to themselves, because that stops you also from being distracted and living in the past or trying to anticipate a future that has not yet occurred. The other thing is that when you're able to live in the present, this actually results in you connecting with others and seeing actually the reality that, like you, everyone is a frail, fragile human being and who is struggling. And it makes one be more kind, more thoughtful, and more gentle to others when you're able to be that to yourself. The interesting thing is that when you connect with other people authentically, this is really the baseline for physiologic effects that affect them and you. You know, many of us talk about these places in the world where people routinely live to be 100. Now, food is a very important part of that, or diet, but just as important is the fact that in these places, people are born there, they die there, they have the same neighbors their entire life, they live in multi-generational households. And the extraordinary thing is that they know from day one that they're loved, that they're accepted, and they're not judged. And when one feels as if they're judged, then this in and of itself creates anxiety, insecurity, and subsequent feelings of stress and anxiety. So the challenge for each of us in this challenging environment is to create a place of psychological safety. Being with people who do not judge you, being with people who accept you, and being able to be vulnerable. One of the greatest challenges for each of us is this idea of vulnerability. So many people, because of their fear of being judged, because they're not in that environment where they're universally loved and accepted for both good and bad, they're in the modern world where they're not surrounded by family, friends, relatives who unconditionally accept them. And the problem is, so many people feel they have to carry a shield to protect them from judgment. And what happens is that for many people, that shield states, I'm this, I'm that, et cetera, to carry their credentials with them as a protection against being judged. But what we know is until you can show your emotions, until you can share your fears and anxieties with another person, it is not possible to really connect. But let me give you a couple examples. There's a study that's been going on at Harvard for over 75 years among men, and they looked at all these different factors in terms of longevity and health. And fundamentally, at the end of the day, it has to be one having authenticity as the center point of their existence, which then results in long-term connection. And all of us, although we may not appreciate it, all of us thrive when we have a connection to even one person who cares about us. And what I'd like to do is to make each of you understand that many of us sit and we believe that, first of all, we're suffering, But we also believe that there's so much suffering in the world that we have no capacity to be helpful or to intervene. And what I would tell you, and frankly, from my own experience, which is a background of significant suffering, having that one person reach out, understand your situation, step in and offer to help is very, very profound. Some people say, I'm not in a position of power, I have no money. But the fact is that oftentimes simply having a smile, touching someone reassuringly, taking the time to speak to somebody who may appear alone, all of which cost absolutely nothing, can actually change a person's life. So in this challenging environment right now, I think each of us has to accept ourselves. We have to love ourselves. We have to be gentle with ourselves. And once we're able to do that, we are liberated to understand the position of another, understand that others are suffering, even though it may not appear to be the case, and that within our capacity is to help alleviate that suffering. You know, oftentimes people say to me, what's it like to be with the Dalai Lama? And I've had the joy of that experience multiple times. And what I tell them is that one of the reasons people are so attracted to him and other elevated spiritual leaders is because as soon as you're in proximity to him, you feel this lightness within yourself. And what that is because you know that you are unconditionally accepted and loved, and you no longer have to carry that projection. So this is, I think, the ultimate truth. The greatest gift you can give yourself and to others is forgiveness, unconditional acceptance, and ultimately the gift of an open heart. So thank you all so much for allowing me to speak with you. I do wish you happiness, and understand that true happiness, deep happiness, comes from having a life of meaning and purpose, and ultimately that is what creates great, deep happiness. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. I still remember when I read your book, Into the Magic Box.
Magic Shop,
of course. And Into the Magic Shop, flying from Vancouver to Mexico. It was a profound impact. And I think that you are really changing so many people's life from a physical point of view, from a spiritual point of view. I just want to say thank you so much, and I recommend everybody to really go and get the book.
Yes, thank you. And just to say, you know, amazingly, the book is now in 40 languages, and actually that K-pop group called BTS, who many of the listeners may know, actually used my book for the basis for their third album called Love Yourself. And in fact, there's a song there called Magic Shop. So again, thank you so much for having me. It's a joy, and continue the wonderful, extraordinary work that you're doing, because you're a hero of mine. Okay, my friend?
Well, you are a hero of mine. Into the Magic Shop. Let's go for it.
Okay. Not the title, though, in every language. Take care.
Yes. en la tienda de magia. Dentro de la tienda de magia.
Exactly. Okay. See you later. Take care.